Hey friend, Chris Vandeviver here from WhyLogicProRules.com. Now today, let's answer the age-old question, should EQ come before or after compression? Now, of course, when it comes to audio, it all depends. But there are some general practices that you can follow that can make this decision way easier. Now, there's an argument for either or. For most of us, we're using EQ to generally shape our tracks to a better spot. So it kind of makes sense that you would compress after the EQ. Get the track closer to what it should sound like, and then compress. Others believe that compression should come before EQ. You want to kind of dynamically tighten up the track before you start deciding to make any sort of EQ adjustments. And then there's another camp that believes that compression should come after corrective EQ. So EQ that you've used to, again, remove that low-end noise that we don't need. Any EQ used to clean up the mud or the aggression in a track. And then compression should come into the picture to tighten things up. And then your general tonal shaping EQ, such as the console EQ. Because general tonal shaping could be considered more of a creative decision instead of like a utilitarian decision. And so we're going to test out all of these different options and we're going to compare and contrast. So I have the compressor set up for each of my tracks. I have a vocal compressor here. I have the guitar compressor, bass, and drums. And I've set these compressors up to occur before the EQs, in between the channel EQ and the console EQ, and after both EQs. So we're going to compare and contrast the different sounds and we're going to decide what's best for each instrument. Now, one thing I just want to point out, I noticed when we have a compressor in the first slot, if I decide to turn on the second row or the third row compressors, we don't see the gain reduction meter change. It seems to only be tied to that first compressor and not any of the other ones. So you can be sure that we're compressing in each instance. It just might not be reflected in the gain reduction meter here. Okay, let's listen to our track just to remind ourselves what it sounds like so far.
I never wanted to get you. I only wanted to be. I never tried to forget you. It's just an inevitability. I never knew what.
Okay, so let's now turn on the compressor in the first slot. So compression is occurring before any sort of EQ. Check it out.
I never wanted to get you. I only wanted to be. I never tried to forget you. It's just an inevitability. I never knew what you went through. Maybe I just couldn't see. Maybe it's pride or the.
Okay, I hope you caught that I turned the compressors off and back on a couple times just to kind of compare and contrast. It sounds like the compressors are tightening up our performance in a good way. All right, let's check out now in between the channel EQ and the console EQ.
I never wanted to get you. I only wanted to be. I never tried to forget you. It's just an inevitability. You went through. Maybe I just couldn't see. Maybe it's pride or the raw truth. Maybe it's vulnerability.
Okay, interesting. Now the compressor after both EQs.
I never wanted to get you. I only wanted to be. Try to forget you. It's just an inevitability. I never knew what you went through. Maybe I just couldn't see. Maybe it's pride or the raw truth. Maybe it's vulnerable.
Okay, very interesting. Now I'm going to do sort of a rapid fire. I'm going to turn on each one of these compressors, turn them off, and kind of switch between.
I never wanted to get you. I only wanted to be. I never tried to forget you. It's just an inevitability. I never knew what you went through. Maybe I just couldn't see. Maybe it's vulnerability.
To my ears, honestly, I think the compressor before the EQs kind of sound the best, but I bet you it's on a track-by-track basis, so let's be sure here. Let's solo the drums and work our way down. Okay, I'm going to pick the compressor between the channel EQ and the console EQ. There's something I tonally like about each stage of the compressor, but I feel like the best balance is after the channel EQ has had its chance to kind of clean up the drums, but before the console EQ adjusts the drums further. Okay, now the bass. I feel that the compressor after both EQs is keeping the bass nice and tight, so I'm going to stick with that. Okay, now the guitars. I feel that the compressor in between the channel EQ and the console EQ helps the guitars fatten up and really occupy more space. I like it. All right, last but not least, the vocals.
I never wanted to get you. I only wanted to be. I never tried to forget you. It's just an inevitability. I never knew what you went through. Maybe I just couldn't see. Maybe it's pride or the raw truth. Maybe it's vulnerability.
All right, I feel the compressor is helping the vocals stand out more, last in line. These vocals are pretty dynamic, so I probably use more than one compressor. But all that to say, your best bet is to start with compression between your corrective EQ, that is the channel EQ, but before any tonal shaping EQ, such as the console EQ. But with the bass and vocals, which tend to be instruments that need more control in terms of dynamics, the compressor comes after both EQs. So now let me get rid of all my compressors. And now let's compare and contrast.
I never wanted to get you. I only wanted to be. I never tried to forget you. It's just an inevitability. I never knew what you went through.
That's pretty awesome. Okay, now tomorrow in our final lesson, we're going to dig into how to use the match EQ to differentiate, to separate instruments that have a hard time playing together, such as the kick drum and the bass guitar. See you then.